A storm rolled over the valley like a wounded animal, howling through the crooked chimneys of Grimsby Hollow, a village so small it didn't exist on most maps. The rain came down in sheets, hammering against the cobblestones and seeping into the cracks of centuries-old homes. But one house on the hill still burned with light, a sickly, amber glow that flickered through warped window panes. Inside, surrounded by sawdust and silence, sat Erik Holtzmann, the Dollmaker. His fingers were cracked and bleeding from hours of work, but he didn't notice. Before him lay his masterpiece, a porcelain doll unlike any he had ever made. Her face was pale, flawless, almost human. Blonde curls framed her delicate cheeks, and her eyes, glass spheres of faint blue, reflected the candlelight like living irises. He whispered the name softly, reverently. Elise. Thunder cracked overhead. The wind shoved against the shutters. On the workbench lay a small heart-shaped box. Inside it, a lock of golden hair tied with a ribbon. His hands trembled as he placed it into the doll's hollow chest cavity, closing the porcelain panel with surgical precision. He reached for a quill, dipped it in ink, and drew a symbol over the doll's sternum, a circle intersected by ancient runes. From his lips came a prayer not found in any Bible. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the candles dimmed. The air grew heavy, suffocating, electric. Erik leaned closer. A faint click echoed from within the doll. Her glass eyes rolled upward, then slowly focused. On him. Erik froze. His breath caught in his throat. The doll blinked once. "Papa?" The voice was faint, like air escaping a flute, but it was enough to send Erik stumbling backward, knocking over his tools. Thunder erupted again, shaking the rafters. The Dollmaker dropped to his knees, weeping, whispering thank yous to every god that would listen. Outside, lightning slashed across the night sky, illuminating the hundreds of dolls that lined the workshop shelves. Each one of them had their eyes open. But the next move would leave everyone speechless. The next morning, the storm had passed, but the air in Grimsby Hollow felt wrong. The sun rose, yet its light seemed weaker somehow, diluted, as if filtered through ash. The Dollmaker didn't leave his workshop that day, or the next. Smoke no longer curled from his chimney, and the bell above his shop door, once jingling with customers seeking toys for their children, had gone silent. But late at night, villagers swore they heard something, footsteps, tiny ones, pattering across the wooden floorboards of the Dollmaker's attic. Then came the laughter, high, childlike, echoing faintly through the cold wind. At first, the villagers dismissed it as loneliness driving the old man mad. He had, after all, lost his only daughter 3 winters ago. The same fire that burned his home and claimed his wife's life had also taken Elise, his angel. The tragedy had left him hollow. His only companions were his tools and the porcelain faces he shaped by candlelight. But when the Reverend Caldwell paid him a visit, hoping to offer prayer and comfort, something happened that none could explain. The priest returned less than 5 minutes after entering the workshop, pale as chalk, his hands trembling. He refused to speak at first. When pressed by the townsfolk, he simply whispered, She called my name." "Who?" they asked. "The child, the one who burned." That night, the church bells rang on their own, and soon, strange stories began to spread. A seamstress claimed that one of her children's dolls, a gift made by Holtzmann years ago, had turned its head toward her in the night. A farmer swore he saw a figure standing in the Dollmaker's window after midnight, small, blonde-haired, and holding something in her arms. Outside, lightning slashed across the night sky, illuminating the hundreds of dolls that lined the workshop shelves. Each one of them had their eyes open, but the next move would leave everyone speechless. The next morning, the storm had passed, but the air in Grimsby Hollow felt wrong. The sun rose, yet its light seemed weaker somehow, diluted, as if filtered through ash. The Dollmaker didn't leave his workshop that day, or the next. Smoke no longer curled from his chimney. and the bell above his shop door, at once jingling with customers seeking toys for their children, had gone silent. But late at night, villagers swore they heard something. Footsteps. Tiny ones. Pattering across the wooden floorboards of the Dollmaker's attic. Then came the laughter. High, childlike, echoing faintly through the cold wind. At first, the villagers dismissed it as loneliness driving the old man mad. He had, after all, lost his only daughter 3 winters ago. The same fire that burned his home and claimed his wife's life had also taken Elise, his angel. The tragedy had left him hollow. His only companions were his tools and the porcelain faces he shaped by candlelight. But when the Reverend Caldwell paid him a visit, hoping to offer prayer and comfort, something happened that none could explain. The priest returned less than 5 minutes after entering the workshop, pale as chalk, his hands trembling. He refused to speak at first. When pressed by the townsfolk, he simply whispered, She called my name." "Who?" they asked. "The child, the one who burned." That night the church bells rang on their own, and soon strange stories began to spread. A seamstress claimed that one of her children's dolls, a gift made by Holtzmann years ago, had turned its head toward her in the night. A farmer swore he saw a figure standing in the dollmaker's window after midnight, small, blonde-haired, and holding something in her arms. When they reached the door, Voss knocked once, no answer. He pounded again. Still nothing. But as he turned to the others, a soft creak echoed from inside, the sound of the latch sliding open on its own. They exchanged uneasy glances. Caldwell crossed himself and whispered, "God go with us," before stepping inside. The air was thick with dust and the sickly sweet scent of varnish. Dozens, no, hundreds, of dolls lined the walls, staring blankly with glassy eyes. Some sat in rocking chairs, others on shelves, others arranged around a tea table as if caught mid-play. But something was wrong with them. Their faces were too human, each one slightly unique, as if modeled after real children. Their skin had a faint translucence, like flesh under porcelain. The constable lifted a doll and frowned. Its scalp bore real hair, fine, blonde strands. "Human," he muttered. "Real hair." Then Caldwell gasped. On the far wall, carved into the wood, were dozens of symbols, circles and jagged runes, painted in a deep brown that hadn't yet faded. Voss leaned closer. "Paint?" The priest's voice trembled. "That's no paint." From the back room came the faint sound of a lullaby, a music box playing off-key. They followed the sound, stepping over scattered doll parts and tiny shoes, until they reached a heavy door marked Elise's room. Voss pushed it open and froze. Inside, a small bed sat neatly made, surrounded by dolls arranged in a perfect circle. On the pillow lay a photo of a smiling girl, Elise, and beside it, a half-burned candle. But what stole their breath was the large porcelain figure seated in the rocking chair, a child-sized doll, perfectly lifelike. Its lips painted a faint pink, its eyes a striking, almost wet blue. "Erik?" Caldwell whispered, his voice shaking. From the shadows behind the chair, something moved. The dollmaker stepped forward, his face gaunt and pale, eyes sunken with exhaustion. "You shouldn't have come," he said softly. "You'll wake her." The constable raised his lantern. "Where are the missing children, Holtzmann?" Erik smiled faintly, not mad, but proud. "They're not missing. Elise was lonely. I just gave her what she wanted." As the light flickered, they saw it, faint movement inside the dolls. Fingers twitching, eyes fluttering. One of them turned its head ever so slightly toward the priest and whispered, almost playfully, "Do you want to play too?" Caldwell screamed and stumbled back. The lantern fell, shattering on the floor. Flames licked up the boards. In the chaos, Erik shouted something in German, a prayer, a warning, or a curse. None of them could tell. Outside, as they fled into the storm, the priest looked back one last time. Through the firelight and smoke, he swore he saw Elise, standing by the window smiling, and behind her, hundreds of tiny hands waving goodbye. But the truth they were about to uncover undefied everything they believed. The fire that night didn't spread. It smoldered just long enough to scorch the walls before dying out on its own. No one could explain why. The timber should have burned to ash, but the flames simply stopped. When the villagers returned at dawn, the workshop still stood. Blackened, yes, but intact. The dolls inside were untouched, their glass eyes gleaming faintly through the soot as though mocking the daylight. Mayor Voss, shaken but resolute, ordered the place sealed. Boards hammered over the windows, chains looped around the door. A notice was nailed to the front. Property of the village, do not enter. Erik Holtzmann was nowhere to be found. The priest swore he had seen him running into the forest during the fire, but no tracks were ever found. Only the faint sound of a music box playing from somewhere deep within the trees. For a few days, things were calm. The missing children were still gone, but the air in Grimsby Hollow began to breathe again. The villagers dared to hope the nightmare was over. Until the 7th night. That was when the screaming started. It began with the constable who'd helped seal the workshop. He woke his wife in the middle of the night, clawing at his chest, yelling that something was moving inside him. By the time help arrived, he was gone. Not missing, not dead. Gone. All that remained on his pillow was a single porcelain tooth. By morning, the boards on the Dollmaker's door were cracked. The chains hung loose. Reverend Caldwell gathered his courage and approached, clutching his crucifix. He could feel warmth radiating from behind the door like breath. Then came a sound that froze him in place, the slow, rhythmic creak, creak, creak of a rocking chair. He whispered a prayer, then another, and then, from inside, a voice replied, the same delicate whisper that had haunted his dreams for days. Papa says I can come out now. The door burst open with unnatural force. A rush of hot air hit him like a furnace blast. Dozens of dolls lay scattered across the floor, some broken, others still upright, their faces cracked into eternal smiles. But what made him drop to his knees wasn't the dolls. It was the workshop walls. Every inch was covered with small handprints, burnt into the wood, charred black, as if children had tried to claw their way out from within. Caldwell staggered backward, whispering, "Dear God, deliver us." But then he saw something that made him choke on his words. Among the ashes on the floor was a small porcelain foot, and it was growing. The cracks closed, the joints bent, the leg twitched. The doll beside it tilted its head, the same one they'd found in Elise's room. Its mouth opened slightly, and from it came a faint, raspy giggle, and beneath that, from deeper inside the house, another sound joined it. Dozens more, all giggling in unison. The priest fled, his crucifix clattering behind him. The villagers heard his screams echo all the way to the chapel. From that day on, no one went near the Dollmaker's house again. But each morning someone noticed the same thing. A new doll sitting in the window, its head slightly turned toward the village below. They said if you stared too long, you could swear its lips were moving. And that's when everything began to fall apart. For a while, Grimsby Hollow tried to pretend life was normal. The mill reopened. The church bells rang again. Yet everyone walked faster past the hill, where the Dollmaker's shop crouched in shadow. But the curse was already loose. It began in little ways. A shepherd's daughter woke crying that her friend Elise whispered to her from the window at night. A seamstress found tiny sooty footprints on her kitchen floor that ended at her child's empty crib. Dogs barked at nothing, then whimpered and hid beneath tables. Within a week, the missing returned. Sort of. The first was the baker's son. They found him standing outside his home at dawn, barefoot in the frost, smiling faintly. When his mother screamed and ran to him, he didn't blink. His skin was cold as wax, and his eyes gleamed like glass. When she shook him, his head lolled to the side with a hollow click. He collapsed, shattering into pieces that glittered white in the sunrise. Inside his chest lay a porcelain heart. By noon, Every bell in the village tolled without a hand touching them. Panic took hold. Families fled. Carts rolled out down muddy roads, but those who left never made it far. Travelers claimed to see them frozen mid-journey, their wagons overturned, passengers stiff and pale as dolls in a toy chest. Reverend Caldwell locked himself in the church, praying until his voice bled raw. The mayor organized what few men remained to burn the Dollmaker's house to the ground. They marched at dusk, torches in hand, hearts hammering with desperate courage. But as they reached the gate, the air grew thick, sweet, almost floral, like perfume masking rot. The torches sputtered. One by one, their flames died, leaving only the faint orange glow from the windows above. Behind the glass, silhouettes moved. Dozens of them, small, child-sized shapes swaying slowly, as though dancing to a lullaby only they could hear. Then the door opened. Erik Holtzmann stepped out. His face was pale, expression serene, eyes glassy with reflected firelight. In his hands he held the child-sized doll, the one they had seen in Elise's room. "She's happy now," he said softly. "She just wants to play." The men raised their weapons, but before they could move, the dolls poured from the doorway like a flood, tiny figures crawling, twitching, moving on all fours. Their porcelain faces cracked and smiling, their fingers tipped with shards of glass. The screams that followed were not human. From the church tower, Caldwell watched in horror as the torches vanished one by one, swallowed by darkness. When the wind shifted, he could hear the faintest melody drifting from the hill, a broken music box tune, punctuated by the giggling of children. By morning, the square was empty. Only the torches remained, neatly lined in a row. Beside them sat new dolls, dozens of them, each one dressed in the same clothes as the missing men. And in the window above the shop, Elise's doll watched over them, her head tilted toward the village below, her lips curved into something that might have been a smile or a promise, but they hadn't seen the worst of it yet. Days turned into weeks. The village of Grimsby Hollow stood silent now, its streets choked with fog and the smell of damp wood. Doors hung open. Curtains fluttered in windows. Only the church bell still rang at noon, moved by no visible hand. Inside the chapel, Reverend Caldwell kept vigil. He was thinner now, eyes sunken, his mind trapped between faith and dread. On the altar lay an old, cracked book, something the mayor's men had found in the Dollmaker's workshop before the night of the attack. Its title was written in Latin, scorched and half-legible, De Formis Animarum, of the shapes of souls. Each page was a nightmare of drawings and symbols, diagrams of bodies, hollowed vessels, and strange notes about binding essence through likeness. At the heart of the text was a ritual, marked with the Dollmaker's handwriting, the ink still wet in places. It described how a soul could be anchored to an object built in its image, but only if that image was made from pieces of the one who loved it most. Caldwell traced the lines with a shaking finger. A phrase had been circled again and again. To restore the lost, another must give of himself. Life for life, memory for memory. The priest closed the book, realization striking him cold. Erik hadn't summoned evil. He had tried to resurrect love. The fire that killed Elise wasn't an accident, not entirely. A candle left burning, a door locked from the inside. Guilt that had festered for years. The Dollmaker's grief had grown into obsession, and obsession had led him to the ritual. He'd built her again, skin of porcelain, eyes of glass, and offered his own soul to fill the void. But the ritual had twisted. Instead of one life returned, it had called for many. Each friend Elise made, each doll he crafted after, became a fragment of his sacrifice multiplied. The curse spread like mold through every creation touched by his longing. Outside wind rattled the chapel windows. Caldwell looked up and froze. Across the square, the Dollmaker's house glowed again. Not candlelight this time, but a pulsing blue light that throbbed in rhythm, like a heartbeat. Then came a sound. Faint, rising, unmistakable. Children's laughter, echoing down the empty streets. He gathered his courage, clutching the book, and stepped outside. The fog parted as he walked, drawn toward that unholy glow. In the distance, he thought he saw figures, small, swaying, almost dancing. As he neared the door, he could hear voices, a man's voice, low and broken, speaking gently. "Hush now, my little one. They'll never take you away again." Caldwell whispered, "Erik, what have you done?" From the window above, two pale faces turned toward him. One old, one young, both wearing the same faint, tranquil smile. And behind them, dozens more appeared, pressing their faces to the glass, whispering the same word again and again. "Play." The priest dropped the book and ran. Behind him, the light inside the workshop flared once, bright as lightning, and then went dark. What they found next would rewrite everything they thought they knew. Reverend Caldwell didn't sleep again after that night. Each hour, the sound of a child's hum drifted through the mist that covered Grimsby Hollow. Sometimes it came from the bell tower, sometimes from beneath the floorboards. He tried to drown it in prayer, but the hymn and the hum began to weave together until he couldn't tell which was which. At dawn, he packed a satchel, one candle, a flask of holy water, and the burned book De Formis Animarum. He told no one where he was going. There was no one left to tell. The path up to the Dollmaker's house was buried under fog. As he climbed, he saw toys scattered along the trail: a wooden horse, a headless doll, a tiny shoe half sunk in mud. The closer he came, the louder the music grew. An old lullaby played on a warped music box, its notes dragging like breath through dust. The front door stood open. Inside, the workshop looked different now. The air shimmered faintly, like heat over a candle. Dolls lay everywhere, hundreds of them, arranged in circles around the center of the room. In the middle sat Erik Holtzmann, the Dollmaker himself. He looked peaceful, too peaceful. His skin pale as plaster, his eyes glossy, reflecting the candlelight in perfect orbs. In his lap rested the child-sized doll Elise, her hands folded neatly. "Erik," Caldwell whispered, stepping closer. "You must end this." The Dollmaker smiled, slow and tired. "I did, Father. I ended everything that hurt her." "You've bound them all," Caldwell said. "You've trapped souls that were never yours to keep." Holtzmann shook his head. "I only wanted her laughter again. But she was lonely. She needed friends." The dolls stirred. Heads turned toward the priest in unison. Porcelain eyelids blinked once. The music box wound itself without a hand touching it. Caldwell opened the book. "If love made the curse, love can release it." He began to read from the torn Latin page, the words shaking in his throat. A wind swept through the room, scattering dust like snow. The candle flames bent toward him, as if the air itself listened. The Dollmaker rose. "You'll take her from me again?" His voice cracked, half man, half echo. "I'll set her free." The walls shuddered. Dolls toppled from shelves. Some began to hum the same lullaby, their mouths barely moving. Elise's eyes lifted toward the priest, so human it made him falter. "Papa," she said softly. "I don't want to go." Holtzmann's face twisted with pain. For a heartbeat, the man inside the madness returned. He looked at the priest, tears glinting like glass shards. "If she leaves, I go with her." Caldwell whispered, "Then let it be so." He finished the last line. The wind roared. The workshop lights flared white, washing the color from the world. The doll's song rose to a single, piercing note, and stopped. When the silence fell, it was absolute. Caldwell opened his eyes. The workshop was empty. No dolls, no Dollmaker. Only the faint smell of ash and the small music box resting on the floor, its key broken clean in half. He picked it up. It was cold. Inside, something rattled. A single golden ribbon tied around a lock of hair. But one final secret still remained. Weeks passed before anyone dared enter Grimsby Hollow again. When they did, they found the village silent, but strangely untouched. Food still on tables, Clocks still ticking, as if life had simply paused. The church doors hung open. Inside, Reverend Caldwell's journal lay on the pulpit. The last entry was dated March 11th, the night he vanished. The ink had run slightly, as though written by trembling hands. The house is quiet now. The curse, I think, is broken. Yet at night, I hear the same lullaby in my dreams. I pray it's only memory, not something waiting to begin again. The journal ended there. But in the margins, someone else had written 3 small words, in a different, careful script. Thank you, Father. Authorities cleared the house, cataloged the strange dolls they found locked in the cellar, dozens of them, unblemished and still, each one with a name tag around its wrist. One tag read Elise, another Erik. The rest bore the names of those who had vanished that winter. The dolls were boxed and sent to a museum in London for study. For a while, nothing strange was reported. Visitors came and went. Curators joked about the legend of the Dollmaker, until one evening, when a night guard on duty at the British Folklore Archive heard music. A faint, lilting melody, echoing through the dark halls, the tune of a child's lullaby, warped and slow. He followed the sound to the display case. Inside, the dolls stood exactly as before, except one. The Elise doll had turned her head slightly toward the glass. Her porcelain lips, once closed, were now parted in a smile. The guard swore the lights flickered as he stared. The tune faded, replaced by a whisper he could not explain, like many small voices overlapping into one. Only when he backed away did he hear it clearly. Playtime isn't over. The recording from that night captured the sound of the music box spinning once more, even though it had no key. But if you ever visit the museum yourself and hear a child humming somewhere down the corridor, don't follow it, because in Grimsby Hollow, every lullaby has a price. They say every curse begins as an act of love. And perhaps that's true. For Erik Holtzmann loved his daughter more than anything in the world. But grief, once it festers, can twist love into something unrecognizable. Something that reaches across the veil and demands a price no heart can afford. After the night watchman's disappearance, the museum quietly removed the exhibit. The dolls were relocated, though no record shows where. Some claim they were sealed in the archives beneath the Thames. Others whisper they were sold to collectors. But the story didn't end there. In the years that followed, several of the museum staff reported strange dreams, visions of fog, of a small house with light flickering in its windows. Some said they heard a lullaby through their radios at night, faint but distinct, always ending with a child's laughter. Each of them described the same little girl, pale skin, golden hair, and eyes that shone like glass. One man resigned, leaving only a single note on his desk. She wanted to play. The parish records of Grimsby Hollow are gone now. The town itself was absorbed into the growing city, its name erased from modern maps. But if you wander far enough down the old country roads at dusk, some say you can still see the faint glow of a workshop window through the trees. And if you listen closely through the wind and the rustle of the leaves, you might hear it. The click of a winding key. Maybe it's just the wind. Or maybe, somewhere out there, Erik Holtzmann is still at his bench, carving, painting, whispering to the child he could never truly let go. Because love, when denied peace, becomes something eternal. And the Dollmaker's love was endless. This was the Dollmaker's curse, a tale of devotion turned damnation, where love refused to die. And so, it never did.